Hey everyone, welcome to the Deep Focus podcast. My name's Aidan,
I'm Clayton.
I'm Taavi.
and today we have a very special episode for me at least. We're going to be going over the films of Orson Welles, probably one of the most kind of famous directors of the classic Hollywood era, I'd say. And if you remember in our first episode, I said he was my favorite director. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into it and talk about all these movies. Can each of you kind of give a breakdown of your experience with these films?
Yeah, I can. I'll go ahead and say I enjoyed this quite a bit. I've never seen Citizen Kane. You know what? I'm sorry to our audience if that makes me seem unprepared for this, but I did watch it twice, so no worries. I think Wells is a connoisseur of exceptional filmmaking. I think he changed the game. I think he is a really good adapter. Specifically, he's pretty good at Shakespeare, and I think he is filled with cheap thrills that I don't mind at all. I cannot speak, nor can I claim to speak for Wells, but I'd love to know if there's any info on this. I kind of think of Wells as like a visionary who made a perfect film at the start, kind of in the eyes of the general public, which eventually got acclaim, especially over time, like in the 60s. And since then, I feel like he's kind of tried to reinvent himself, though, through his work as he progressed past Citizen Kane. I don't know if I'm wrong in that, but maybe.
No, I definitely think there are like periods of his career, especially because he like moved to Europe. I think that's a pretty clear like demarcation point, and like I definitely think he tried to reinvent his brand a few times, but yeah.
Yeah, so Wells, yeah, I pretty much don't have any prior experience with Wells. I haven't seen any of these films, while I obviously knew the titles of Citizen Kane and Touch of Evil, basically, and I knew that Wells was an influential director and such, but yeah, I just somehow never watched any of his work, but I'm happy I did it now, at least.
I'm going to go so far as to say that he's not only an influential director and filmmakers, but also on America as a whole in the changing landscape of American culture. Just truly a reset.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree with that. In terms of like his influence on broader culture. But in terms of my familiarity, I had seen 10 of these movies. The only ones that were new to me were Macbeth and The Trial. So yeah, but I was very excited to watch them because, you know, if you've made 10 films I generally really like, then yeah, I'm probably gonna like the last two. So do you guys want to start getting into our rankings?
Sure thing. You can go first.
All right.
I'll go last. Tavi, you can go right in the middle.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
for our rankings, we're gonna do the bottom two together, and then we'll rank our top 10 individually. One film we're not including is The Immortal Story because one of us couldn't like track it down. And that's okay because that movie kind of sucks. So it's not a huge loss, but yeah, I'm gonna go into my combined number 12 and number 11. Um, my number 12, this I think is actually controversial. My least favorite of these films is F for Fake. I think it's a good movie, and I don't think he has any bad movies, just to say that. But in terms of watching all of these, I found that this one kind of offers me the least as a viewer. It kind of feels very unfocused. It's kind of like a quasi documentary about an art forger and a biography forger, and it's also told by Wells, who injects fiction into that. So it's very meta in that sense that he's telling a story about fakes while using trickery and what's real and what's fake. I think I like the concept more than I like the actual movie, but I don't think it's bad. I'm going 3 stars on this one, but I did enjoy it. And then moving on to my number 11, I have his production of Othello at number 11. I think this movie is clearly better than F for Fake for me, but for me, in terms of his classic run, it is the weakest link in the chain. I think this film was filmed very intermittently over 3 years. I think that kind of shows. There are some scenes that the first part of the scene was shot in like Italy in 1949, and the next part was in Morocco 2.5 years later. I think it kind of shows. I think it's very story-wise unfocused. Um, but I do respect a lot of the staging and the cinematography. I think especially the opening scene with Othello's funeral is very amazingly shot. But yeah, if I had not read the play, I don't think I would understand what was happening at all. But just on a purely visual and spectacle level, the film engages me enough to the point that I give it a 3.5 out of
I have a feeling we're gonna have another eyes wide shut situation here.
5. Maybe.
Um, yep, we will.
Yeah, so my last placement, I honestly don't know is it a hot take or not, basically, but it's Macbeth, 1948. I gotta say, I don't really know much about Shakespeare, and watching Macbeth, I don't think there was any subtitles even, so I can't exactly remember that, but oh, I was so lost. I was so lost watching it, and it really hurt my experience watching it. Also, I had to watch it from it was in YouTube, and oh oh dear, the quality of the was so bad. It's gonna be perhaps a little unfair rating for this because my personal experience watching it wasn't definitely ideal for this film. Although I think I would have liked something to like help me perhaps understand it more.
Are you familiar with any of Shakespeare's other work, or is this like
Um,
have you seen another adaptation of Macbeth? I know they have the recent
no, no,
Owen run.
no.
Okay,
Uh, I may have seen some Shakespeare adaptation before, but I just can't remember at this moment. But
yeah, with
yeah,
these, I feel like it helps to know the story itself. But yeah,
oh
continue. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
definitely, yeah. And it's pretty well made. It's obviously well so, but I don't know. I had a tough time to figure out the rating, so I tried to be a little I'm like a halfway score, so 2.5 out of 5 for this. Like I'm indifferent about the film really. And number 11 is Othello from 1951, another Shakespeare adaptation for me, and I think I agree kind of with what Aidan said already. Like another where I was kind of lost with the film. Um, obviously, I didn't. I should have probably said it in my Macbeth section, but I think the language already is like making it even harder for me to understand. Like it has its like I don't know how to describe it really, but like perhaps perhaps Clay can later like how is the it has its own like a style of language. I don't know how to really
It's
say
in
it, but
it's in like early modern English, I think is the term for what the Shakespeare like original plays were written in, which obviously the language has kind of like evolved a lot. So
yeah, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I think the acting is okay and all. I I think this again just has to come with my experiences of kind of being lost in the film. Like what is what? But
I get it. I have a theater background, and I think with Shakespeare, it's extremely important to know the source material before you see any kind of adaptation. Maybe some people don't agree with me on that take, but I don't know. I'm a reader.
Mm,
I don't. It
yeah,
helps me out.
yeah. So I'm going also 2.5 stars for this. So Othello at 2.5.
Interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. Certainly garnered a reaction from one of you guys, but okay, at the bottom, the worst Orson Welles film. I have Citizen Kane. No, I don't. I don't have Citizen Kane. I'm kidding. Don't worry. Okay. My number 12 is a movie that's kind of like Citizen Kane. It deals with the past of a central character and a man discovering the past of the central character. I have Confidential Report at number 12. Yeah, it involves yet another wealthy, powerful man who doesn't get pure concepts of real love. Particularly, however, I believe this movie falls incredibly flat and really just, it's not for me. I think the character of Arkaden is so unbelievably underdeveloped and has a dichotomy of two personas, and this is reflected in his makeup, which is simultaneously silly yet completely serious. Kind of brings to mind another character that's going to be later down, a little bit later, not too far. But like I mentioned, a lot of this movie kind of rehashes ideas of Citizen Kane. You know, you have a smuggler, which is kind of reminiscent of the reporter in that movie, trying to uncover Arkanen's life. You can compare this to Citizen Kane all you want, but this is nowhere near that level. You could feel the poor editing style here and the lackadaisical sense of production. I think the lead here is not a good actor at all either. Yeah, Robert Arden, he sucks. Every scene he was in, I did not care for him at all. I think this guy is so bad. I think he has only the charisma of that of an extra in a movie. He was very annoying. One of the most annoying characters ever put to screen, I think. This movie though suffers from a problem that I just think is so tragic in Wells' life, and that's studio interference. It's really sad. You know, there's literally 7 different versions of this film. The one I watched, by the way, is Confidential Report. It kind of makes you wonder why and who do we blame here. In interviews, I think even Wells is dissatisfied at this cut, but it seems like he's like dissatisfied at every cut that's been released. I think he was kind of going for a more complex structure, sort of like Citizen Kane, that's also kind of easily accessible. But this cut didn't reflect that. I think it's a little bit self-imposed, and he kind of hones it in here. I don't think my thoughts will change on any other version. I think this is one of the few stories penned by Wells, and I think he's more of a master at adaptation than original source materials. Some positives, you can sort of tell Wells had a lot of fun with this movie, but like I said, I didn't care for it. I'm going to give it 2.5. Thought about pushing it down to 2, but I think the fact that it has a lot of ideas from bigger movies like Kane helps, and he's trying to grow on the stuff that made him successful instead of going backwards. But this is a step down. Prior to this movie, Wells had a very diverse catalog, and I was hoping after this movie he'd move in a different direction, and he certainly does. However, before this, he stuck with Shakespeare for quite a bit, and that leads me into my number 11, which is really interesting because you guys, we all three have the same number 11. We have Othello, and that's my number 11 as well. I'm going to be incredibly honest. I'm not familiar with this Shakespeare adaptation. I probably blame good old society for that, as many Shakespeare adaptations are pretty much the same. You know, you have plenty of the Macbeths, which I'll get to, lots of the Romeo and Juliets, and you even have your King Lears, which are constantly portrayed in film, and I think it's a great medium for that. If film was around in Shakespeare's time, there would have been some really good productions. So beyond that stuff, there's things like Midsummer Night's Dream and Much Ado About Nothing that also makes for great stage work. And you see many production like those Othello kind of seems the most underutilized in Shakespeare's catalog, like in terms of adaptations. So I think it's really cool that Wells wanted to make this into a screenplay. Although I wish it didn't come so soon after Macbeth. This is his independent effort, from what I understood. It's essentially a film about jealousy. I'll say the acting is much better in this, but I believe it's mainly due to Wells's direction. You can see you can see the subtleties in Othello's face with the close-ups and everything. To understand Shakespeare, I believe it's important to not get so enamored by the language, but to immerse yourself in the story and the way it is told and portrayed in any kind of medium. I think on a narrative structure, this is much better than Arkaden and more layered, as much like kind of like Lolita. It sort of begins with the ending. I don't have a problem with the writing. I mean, it's Shakespeare, you know. So so much as I have the problem with how the story is put to screen, though, the editing and especially the sound mixing kind of makes it tough to understand the dialogue sometimes, and I think that's also a crucial part to get the essence of the world of Shakespeare. This suffers, though, and I'm going to say it. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Wells, I think he's an incredible director, and I talked about Aidan with this. We had some discussions, and he just doesn't understand. I don't like it whenever directors cast themselves in roles, and it sort of reflects here because in this film, Wells did use blackface, and that's a problem. I have some issues with that, obviously. You know, he's directed stage productions in the past, apparently, with black cast, so there's no reason for him to do this. It's frustrating, and I'm not going to stand for it at all. This is my stand. 2.5 stars. Deathbed scene was really good though, and I thought it was shot with precise camera work. But I promise you guys, I don't have a Shakespeare bias, so don't think I do.
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of what you said there. And that kind of leads me into my number 10, which is Mr. Arkaden slash Confidential Report. I agree with like most of what you said. I think Robert Arden is not a good actor at all. I think from what I read, he was mostly cast because he was friends with Orson Welles and because the budget was very low. But I don't think he's very good. I will say I kind of like the story. I think it's kind of interesting. I think the plot twist is cool. The idea that Arkadin commissions a confidential report on his life, but he's not actually trying to learn his life. He's trying to track down witnesses to his old criminal activities so he can kill them. I think that's a cool, like, it's not exactly like brilliant or anything, but I think a cool story to tell. It's kind of unexpected. But yeah, I don't know. For me, this movie kind of has a pulpy charm to it. I give it a low 4. I still like it, but yeah, I think this movie has a cool kind of low, somber energy. And I think he might have taken that from Carol Reed's The Third Man, which he starred in. I see some stylistic similarities. But yeah, 4 out of 5 for me, a very weak one. But I enjoy the film enough that I would like to revisit it, and I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's amazing, but I enjoy the film.
That's fair.
Yeah, so basically my number 10 is also Mr. Arkadin slash Confidential Report. And yeah, I'm gonna keep it quite short. I don't know what to really add there. I basically agree with a lot of you already said. It was cool that it was that it was shot in multiple places, and it was like a French, Spanish, and Swiss co-production. And yeah, I also think this film had some questionable acting as well. Basically, I have difficulty because I just think this is one of the more forgettable films I watched, honestly. Like,
I agree.
yeah, it's a lot. I guess I should have probably made better notes while I was watching, but I don't know. This is just it just went by really, and I didn't have an awful time. I'm gonna say that, and basically I didn't perhaps have the same problem as the last two, where I was like super lost in the film, like what's happening. So, and it's still a Wells film. It's a pretty well made in technical aspects, and so I'm gonna give it a 3 stars. Like it's pretty solid, but I don't know, nothing more perhaps for me at least.
So it seems we're pretty much in alignment right now. I'm taking notes. I hope I don't change that here. I'm going to reiterate again that I swear I do not have a Shakespeare bias. I just think this film is crunchy, like really crunchy. I have Chimes at Midnight at number 10. There's some good moments here. I really like the war sequence, you know, but I feel like drawing adaptations from multiple source materials doesn't really work, in my opinion. And maybe you can excuse that with Shakespeare because there's so many movies and films have done this before. But like if it was any other person writing that novel, it would be unacceptable, you know? And I find it a little bit unacceptable here. I found this movie a little bit too ambiguous and hard to comprehend for my tastes. And it kind of really I was at this point where I was like, man, like cautiously optimistic to go into a Wells film. And I didn't feel like that before. But oh well, such is the case. That with some of these films at the bottom, it's fine. Wells said of this film that he played Falstaff as kind of a tragic figure with a sense of humor to the audience, just like he was funny to those around him. But I didn't care for that. I didn't care for him playing that character that way. The battle scene alone, though, brings us up to 3 stars, so that's fine. It's not bad. I just it's not for me. It's my number 10.
Yeah, it's interesting ranking given that it was Orson Welles' number one, but I understand the points you made. You know, it was his favorite film, but doesn't mean it has to be everybody's. But my next two, I think, will each be kind of controversial, but my number nine is going to be The Trial. And yeah, I think this movie's really good. It's definitely his most ambiguous film. It's obviously based on the Kafka book. And I like that. I like the kind of parable that opens it up, the short story. I think that's very interesting, kind of raises a lot of questions. But I don't know. This might be a case where I just not sure if I get it because this might be a movie that's smarter than me, I guess. But I'm still giving it 4 stars because I think Anthony Perkins gives a very great central performance. I think he's a really good actor. And I really like a lot of the camera angles. He's going very much into Dutch angles here, and that's really cool. And there's also some stuff he does with projection, like diegetic projection, where his character is showing Perkins' character like images, and it's an interesting way of doing things. I don't think many directors have shot something like that. But yeah, it has that ambition that I like. Even though it's a little ambiguous, it leaves me kind of muddled sometimes. I'm still gonna give it kind of a 4, so 4 out of 5.
Cool. I'm gonna agree with Clay because my number 9 is also Chimes at Midnight. I'm sorry, I guess I do have some sort of Shakespeare bias because all of these are pretty low for me. But I just being honest here. This is about the Prince Hal, and he like has to choose between do he follow his father, who's like a, I don't know the exact title, was he like a king or something? I don't remember, but or to his
Yeah, he's the
friend.
king of England.
Yeah, and or to his king, to his friend, who's played by Wells. And I think the biggest problem I had this film, I didn't really enjoy most of the characters. I think some of them felt super goofy, especially in the first half. Like I remember a lot of them were laughing all the time. Like didn't feel genuine to me at all, honestly. I also think that I also like the battle scene that Clay was describing earlier. I think that was pretty well made and fun to watch. Perhaps these sort of period films are exactly my like number one cup of tea, but like, and I don't know, this didn't really have a really big budget if I recall too, so perhaps it shows a little in some spots, but
Yeah, I don't mind period dramas, but Shakespeare is so common, and I don't know. I understand that you have
yeah.
Shakespeare at the bottom. It's okay to have a bias. That's fine.
Yeah, I didn't like think when I was watching like I have some sort of bias, but I guess now I'm kind of realizing when, because all of them are in the bottom, that there has to be some sort of link there. But um, yeah, it's a solid film. Like not a not a film I would really rewatch or anything. Like it's 3 stars for me. Chimes at midnight.
Nice, nice. I appreciate your ranking, Tavi, because it makes sense. One of you guys. That's fine. Okay, here's the thing. This next film, my number 9, we're in good, almost great territory. So like a high mid is what we're looking at here. Um, so apparently Wes Anderson loves this movie, and you can definitely tell. I have The Magnificent Ambersons at number 9. I'm going 3.5. So what's interesting about this film is that it's the obvious natural progression from Citizen Kane, because Citizen Kane was more of a single character story, and his sophomore effort really takes a look at an entire family, which is kind of like very Wes Anderson esque, sort of like the Royal Tenenbaums. And to be honest, I see a lot of similarities between that movie and this one. The title of both films notwithstanding, the Magnificent Ambersons and the Royal Tenenbaums, both films are indeed sort of linked in a way. As the Magnificent Ambersons and the Royal Tenenbaums kind of explore the journey of the patriarch and social change. There's a roll call at the end of Ambersons, and there's a roll call at the beginning of Tenenbaums. So one of the things, Aidan doesn't like Wes Anderson. He's the resident Wes Anderson hater here. And I don't understand, if he loves this movie, there's no way he can't not appreciate Wes Anderson. But that's besides the point. I feel like this film has something that I deeply admire in filmmaking, and that's where a specific location is used sort of as a character in and of itself. And I'm talking about the house here. I think it's gorgeous, so gorgeous. There's a creative shot where there's an argument happening, and they're going up a stairwell. So that was like, wow. The shots within the house kind of show that this house has deep layers to it, and it can be expansive and open, but also claustrophobic and tight. The acting in this is pretty top notch, cutting edge even. Tim Holt as Georgie is one of the most spoiled characters I've ever seen on screen, next to Lord Farquaad in Shrek. I think he's extremely possessive in his pursuits. I adore movies where the rich kind of succumbs to poverty, but the ending sort of redacts this aspect. So that brings it down a little bit. Much like The Great Gatsby, there's old money and new money comparisons. But unlike that film, instead of money, it's really just change, social change. The automobile particularly represents that change. Um, this movie isn't really its true form, though. And again, you have that tragic case of studio interference, and it's just so sad. Um, I I know most people appreciate it, and it's very well acclaimed, and probably some people have it in their top Orson Welles films. But I can only hope that the real cut is out there somewhere and will be found in South America and make somebody really rich. So you never know. It's that shit's got to be worth millions. But this is the greatest example of studio interference if I can see one, and it's even a decent length. But like, there's a longer version of this. I'm more engaged by the history of this film than the actual film itself. But it's 3.5 stars. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, no kind of discussion of that film would be complete without talking about kind of the hacking it was subjected to in editing. And yeah, well, it's interesting because the ending that Orson Welles shot, the entire family basically ends up like homeless and destitute, which was considered just so much of a downer by the studio that they got rid of it and wrote a new one. So, but that's one
See,
of
that
the.
would have worked. That
Yeah,
would
I
have worked for
agree.
me.
I think it would have perfectly fit the movie's kind of like depressed tone. Um, but but yeah, that kind of sort of leads me into my number 8, which actually is on a pretty similar. I'm on a pretty similar wavelength as you guys so far. My number 8 is Chimes at Midnight. Um, I like the movie. I'm just kind of this one's a weird one to rank because with some of his other films that I have this one at 4 stars as well. But with something like Mr. Arcadin, everything is kind of like mediocre, like it's passable. Some things are good, some things are bad. With this one, it feels like it's on extreme ends of the spectrum. Like certain things are absolutely masterfully done and just perfect, and other things are not good really at all. I think the photography is some of the best in his entire career. I love the way he shoots snow. I really like the music. The battle sequence is legendary. He only had, I think, about 150 extras or something, and he makes it look like it's a massive battle. That's really cool. I just think this film, it's unfocused as a result of being taken from 5 different Shakespeare plays. And I understand his goal was to take these elements and turn it into one story just about Falstaff, who's kind of a supporting character in all of these. I think it succeeds more often than it fails, which is why it gets a 4, but I still think there are problems. I just as a side note, I think the sound mixing on this film is absolutely atrocious. I think it sounds like awful.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
the recording equipment I think was very bad, and there's also a lot of dubbing. But yeah, I that's a big problem for me. And also, I think some of the scenes are just staged a little confusingly. It's parts of it are unfocused, but the parts of it that are focused, I think nail it. I think Orson Welles as an actor gives an amazing performance in the scene where Hal rejects Falstaff and you just see kind of the pain in his face, pain in his eyes, and then he dies later. I think that's really powerful like emotion in the performance. But yeah, I'm going with 4 stars, Chimes at Midnight. It's my number 8. It's still a good movie, and you should still check it out, in my opinion.
So I want to say something real quick, and actually a question. How much studio interference was was there on that film? Because I know it's an independent effort, and
There
maybe
was
that's
there was not studio interference, but what you did have was kind of lack of budget, forcing things to have to be rewritten, reshot. The film would take long breaks, in filming, so there was kind of budget problems, but there wasn't like studio interference. The version that Wells cut was his cut. It just had material that he had to shoot on a lower budget and with less resources than he would have preferred.
mhm. Maybe it's so strange that Wells prefers that film, like in all of his catalog. It kind of reminds me of like David Bowie preferring Buddha of Suburbia to the rest of his discography. Artists are weird.
Yeah, they have a different relationship to their work than we do as the audience. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, nice review there. I'm again kinda following in Clay's footsteps here. I'm also going number 8, the the Magnificent Ambersons. And I don't know. Perhaps this is my biggest hot take in my list. I don't know, but this kind of disappointed me, especially coming after Citizen Kane. This follows the family of Ambersons and like their sad story of their declining financial wealth after like automobiles started to rise. And in some respects I think bored is a little big word perhaps for it, because in some respects it's only like under 90 minutes or something like that. Felt a little safe for me. Perhaps I would describe it as like that. It's still well made with its lighting and camera work, but like some of the characters, I basically have the same problems as in my number 9. I couldn't get into them as much as I would have wanted. Like George Amberson, I think Tim Holt plays him really well. Oh, I just he was like super annoying to me. I just want to like shout at him or something. Like his attitude was off the charts in this film. And I don't know, the ending was also really safe. This is obviously the studio part because why it was safe, so I can't perhaps blame Wells for this, but I guess I have to blame for the movie. Though I would have liked to see the Wells version of it, although it also adds an extra hour that sounds a little scary, perhaps for me. But yeah, I think it's still a good movie. I would rate it a 3.5 out of 5. Like it's still like 90 minutes. It goes pretty fast, and like I just think it's a little safe. Take it how you want, but yeah, that's my number 8.
Taavi, we're on the same wavelength here, and that's really cool. I promise, Aidan, we didn't conspire before this. No conspicuous
No.
plans, I promise. This next one is a movie that surprised me a little bit. Aidan mentioned it briefly in our posthumous release video. I'm talking about Other Side of the Wind. I didn't know what to expect about this film at all, except Netflix presents. So that's kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting this film to be in color. I thought it would be in black and white, but it's not. It kind of reflects the ever-changing landscape of Hollywood in the 1970s. Kind of brings to mind directors like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and what they were bringing to the table. Watch our Spielberg-a-thon series. That's still ongoing. Sorry to plug, but not only that, it also brings to mind an autobiograph of the career as a whole of Orson Welles. I think it's a fitting ending to his career. There's an element of critical satire, lots of irony in this movie, and I appreciate that Welles kind of ends his career with an exploration of counterculture America fit with sex, violence, and gay undertones. It's sort of the yin to his yang of his striking beginnings in the 1940s as he was criticizing American capitalistic greed and class struggles. Here he's drawing his attention to film and the studio. This is kind of Wells saying that he's pissed off at studio interference, and I think it's a fitting end to his career. I don't really have much else to say about it. Is it my favorite closing movie by a powerhouse of a director? Not so much, but it's 3.5 stars. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Moving on, mine is a film that Taavi already talked about, which is Macbeth. It's my number 7. And I think this film kind of suffers from some low budget aspects, but I still think it's really strong and really kind of captivating. I like it. It was shot on like leftover sets from westerns and B movies, and you can kind of tell he goes very abstract with it because he doesn't have a lot to work with. So there's a lot of fog and big shapes and that kind of thing. It feels like he's very much pushing this motif of like abstract, wide open spaces. It's kind of like a visual theme with this film. But I think it's very well shot. The scene with the witches is really well done. I think the ending is very well shot as well. He's going very much with this dark, dense, black and white style of photography, which I very much like. The scene with, I think the costumes are pretty cool too, even though they're obviously low budget. I think kind of the crown he has, like it looks very cool. I like it. But yeah, this film does have a problem where it was all the dialogue was recorded first, and then on the set, the actors like mouthed the words as it was playing, which was a budget thing. And that kind of hurts it sometimes because it's the lip movements don't match. But I still like it, and just I'm gonna give it kind of a low 4.5, mainly because I think it's so striking visually, and his eye for composition is so strong that all of these, every moment of the film could be like the best shot in some other movie. It's just he has such a great eye um, for composing these images and these scenes that I think shines through, even on a film like this, which is obviously not the S tier of his filmography. But yeah, 4.5 for Macbeth.
I'm glad you enjoyed it better, Aidan. But yeah, my number 7 is The Other Side of the Wind, 2018 from Netflix.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at us.
Yeah, I think this is a really cool watch. Like, I think it's kind of unique film. I don't really know what would be something close to this kind of film. Perhaps there's really good examples, but I don't really know. But it felt like this very experimental drama of this, like them trying to complete this film, and I think the aspect of being a film within a film was really interesting and kind of fun, honestly. This is a hard film to talk about. I don't think this is an easy watch per se. If I would have to try to describe it, it's like this. It has this sort of mockumentary feeling to it, and like lots of differently styled footage coming around with a lot of time, and it kind of feels avant-garde at times, and it's kind of hard to follow in a way. I think I'm really rating this because I think it wasn't how interesting it was, but it's not like something to just put on really. So I think it's a good film. I'm giving it a 3.5 stars. The Other Side of the Wind, number 7.
Nice, nice. So I'm out of 3.5 star territory. I'm on to 4 stars now. Um, I told you guys I don't have a Shakespeare bias because I really love this, and I was sitting here nodding my head the whole time Aidan was talking about this film. I got Macbeth at number 7. I think this film is a marvel. I have uh, okay. I know I mentioned biases, but this is my favorite Shakespeare play, so next to Midsummer Night's Dream, maybe. So it's up there. I was extremely curious how he would adapt it. Most people, I think, tend to play it safe with Macbeth, but not Wells. I like the grittiness and the art house expression in this movie. At this point in my dive, I was thinking that Wells would be really suited for the horror genre, and he doesn't really dive deep into this pretty much, except sort of he does in another film that I'm going to talk about later. Uh, it kind of takes inspiration from that other film that I'm going to talk about later as well. But or at least that film took inspiration from this. Um, I think this is a dark and morbid story, and the aesthetic of this film kind of brings that to life, and that's what I want in Shakespeare. Um, I think it's an avenue to appreciate the linguistics coming alive at you with full force whenever you adapt a Shakespeare production into anything, really, whether it be cinema or plays or anything like that. But he brings kind of sort of a gothic character to this atmosphere. Um, and Wells's character is sort of a haunting approach to the role of Macbeth, and he really brings the character alive and kills every soliloquy in this film. The witches are constantly looming in this film as well, so it's like a little presence. For those who aren't familiar with the story of Macbeth, which is essentially about a man who receives an oracle to be king by 3 witches, this could be kind of hard to follow, as the edits admittedly are a little bit rough, but I think it gets better later down the line in that aspect. But this is 4 stars. I think it's great. Macbeth, my number 7.
Cool. I see we're in agreement on that one's placement. For my number 6, I'm going to talk about a movie that neither of you have talked about, actually, which is The Stranger. I think it's my number 6. I think this movie's really good. It's kind of the closest thing I'd say to just like a standard, really good movie in his filmography. It has really great camera work, kind of contrast between foreground, background. That's really neat. And just he's doing similar kind of deep focus photography, not to plug our title that he did with Citizen Kane. And I like a lot of the performances. Obviously, he leads as Charles Rankin slash Franz Kindler, who's a Nazi war criminal posing as an American academic. And I think he nails the performance. I think he does a really good job selling him as kind of like this guy in exile and on the run, and with this paranoia to him. But also he has this kind of Nazi zealotry, of course. Yeah, I think this movie's just really strong. This has a lot of cool long takes too. Like there's a scene where he runs into another like Nazi on the run. And there's a really long take. I think it's like 4, maybe even 5 minutes of them walking through the woods, and it ends with Rankin or Kindler killing the other man, Meineke, which I think is just really cool. I think the entire shooting is just very well done. There is some scenes that were cut that Orson Welles wanted. There are extra footage that he wanted to include, including early scenes involving like a chase through South America with the characters. But I don't know if that would have helped it a ton, maybe a little bit. But as it is, I think the pacing's pretty good. Orson Welles didn't like this movie because he thought it wasn't like him enough. I don't really agree though, because I think it's still really strong. I'm going to give it a 4.5. I think it's a really good movie. I've got on my hands talking about The Stranger.
really cool. I didn't know that there was an additional South American scene that he wanted to. Very
Yeah, there
neat.
was extra footage, and I think the first 16 minutes of the film were cut. So like the first big chunk.
My number 6 is F for fake, and I think this is another cool film. It's a docudrama, being both a documentary and a drama film in like one package. And this is about an art forger, Elmer, and it's about dishonesty and fraudness, and even spoiler alert from Welles's part, kinda like like the exact ending, I mean. And I think it's an interesting visual watch. I think it kind of goes over my tiny head a little, but I don't know. I think this and the last one was like perhaps a little hard to rate to his other stuff. It almost felt like so different to like the other Wells films we just watched. Like where to really put these films, because but yeah, it's a good, I think it's a good film. It's an interesting, and like I would recommend it to watch it at least once, and just I think it's a good film. 3.5 stars.
One thing I've noticed at this point, well, not even at this point, just looking at Wells's filmography as a whole, I've noticed in some, if not most of his films, he kind of saves his grandest moments at the ending, and I think it makes for excellent pacing and a great climax. But at a certain point, it gets a little bit formulaic, which is fine if you're going into film knowing what to expect from a director. Um, it kind of makes for a familiar, comforting watch. But personally, I kind of need a switch up, and I feel like this next one he saves his most. I feel like this next one, it's not really the definitive rule for all films, but it's certainly not the case with this next one. This is a big one that I got at number 6. I have Citizen Kane. That's it. I have Citizen Kane. I love most shots in this film. Um, Pretty much every frame is just really good. The opening montage and the iconic snow globe shot, just chef's kiss. I don't really know where to begin with this film. I could begin with the accusations that Orson Welles is an egomaniac who stole this film from Herman Mankiewicz, which is false, by the way, or the incredible approach in this film that is just so ahead of its time. It's so modern. I feel like even today, um, or the way that this movie is kind of a character study of America, which also rings true today. Even though this was made in like the 1940s, it's just mind-boggling to me. Um, I guess I'll start at the influences. There's no denying that this movie shaped culture, like I was saying earlier, to the max. It's a literal cultural reset. And you see this character's footprints on films released much later down the road, like There Will Be Blood, which is a film taken place prior to this film, but also has the Kane footprint, or even films like The Social Network, which has the Kane footprint. A few things that irk me with this movie is the decision to darker reporters' faces. It's kind of a big letdown because we are looking at a portrait of a media mogul here. So you would think that reporters are pretty much a big aspect of this film, but I guess it's not. I guess he doesn't want to say that with this film. I think every frame kind of puts us into the mindset of Citizen Kane. I don't like him. Obviously, I think he's selfish. I think he takes but never gives. I feel no sympathy for him, but it achieves that emotion from me and really makes me feel that way. So that's something good. I'm glad he died in a pity. I'm glad no one knows the meaning of Rosebud in the general public, except us as the audience, obviously, because odds are he'll get more sympathy. And maybe he does get a little sympathy, but from an audience standpoint, like personally speaking, I don't sympathize with him. I reject that. I think this poor pitiful bastard Kane is just, he's a terrible person. But let's end at the source. I think Mankiewicz did write a draft on this story, but Wells did a subsequent draft and really added to the character of Kane, to what we know and appreciate in character studies today. I think he's not egotistical so much as he's incredibly confident. Orson Welles is, and I think it shows with this debut feature. Accusations from Pauline Kael that says otherwise is simply not true. I think it's ill-mannered and is a pitch poor attempt at the truth that will lead into another movie that I think is a little bit better than this. But as it stands for now, I'm giving the greatest movie of all time 4 stars. That's my list.
Okay, so 4. That's yeah. I mean, my interpretation of the reporter's face being blank is mostly just that he's meant to be a surrogate for the audience. That's kind of how I read it, and the idea that Kane's life affected so many that the like supposed guy uncovering it is nameless because he's just one of many. But yeah, so we're getting into the 5-star zone for me from now on. And my first one is going to be The Magnificent Ambersons at number 5. I kind of had a difficult time rating and ranking this film because I was almost torn between ranking what's there, what could be there, what the intent was, what the final product is, all the various things. And I think ultimately I came to a kind of weak 5 based on the fact that it has so much in it that I really like. I think he actually has kind of matured a little bit technically since Kane. I think this features even more ambitious cinematography, and but I think the editing is a little bad from Robert Wise, who re-edited the film after Kane left for South America. So I think that's a problem. I see a lot of people complaining about Tim Holt as Amberson, not from you guys, but just kind of like reviews I've read online. And I'm like, I mean, the character is written to be this annoying and selfish and spoiled guy. So, I mean, he's just playing the character. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the ending, but I think the first 87 minutes is a perfect film for me. If there was a way just to shear off the ending, then I would just do it. I think if you're watching this movie, you should stop watching it when there's the whole George's comeuppance scene when he prays by his mother's bed. I think that should be the ending of the movie. If you're watching this, you shouldn't bother with the scenes that were added by the studio because I just think they kind of rob the material of its majesty. But I'm giving it a 5 because it just has so much going for it. It has so much technical wizardry and good performances, really strong performances, and it's absolutely beautiful and breathtaking visually. So yeah, Magnificent Ambersons, number 5. I'm giving it a tepid 5 out of 5. Aww. But it's still, I'm pretty solid on it being a 5 for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry for my next placement in number 5. This is an film noir from 1947, and it's called The Lady from Shanghai. Yeah, this was released a year after the previous film noir, The Stranger. I was excited for this film because of a certain person, but my personal experience hurted the film a little. You're basically putting a Finnish man to watch a film without any subtitles. I think that's a crime number one there. So basically, that means a lot of the dialogue went over my head. That's was a tough thing for me.
So whatever platform you watched this on, it wouldn't allow you to use subtitles?
Yeah, I watched it from YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I don't think this was in streaming here. So, but
That's
yeah,
understandable. Yeah.
yeah. So basically the plot is like there's like this murder plot, which is an and Michael O'Hara, played by Wells himself, is hired to do this murder plot, and then really he gets himself implicated to the murder, like while he's an innocent. And yeah, I think this film looks beautiful. Like I see the technical part of this film. It's a beauty to look at, and I did love the ending. With the Hall of Mirrors scene.
Oh my
I
god,
think
yes. Yes. Loved it.
yeah, that was a highlight. But if I would had a better experience, I would probably give it a half star higher at least. It needs a rewatch someday. I can be honest in that statement, and so it's now a good film. 3.5 stars from me.
Cool. The next two films I have on this list were I thought would be a little bit interchangeable, but I decided on a winner, and it's not this one. Taavi, you mentioned it already. It's Lady from Shanghai at number 5. I'm going up to 4.5 stars. I think it's great. I think it has one of the best ending sequences I've ever seen in a film. Um, there's incredible acting here across the board. Although Wells kind of has a pitch poor Irish accent that throws me off a little bit, and that's the one gripe I have about this movie that's not gonna bring it up to a 5-star standard. Sadly, this movie is about the romantic gaze that allures us all. The set pieces, the phenomenal Hall of Mirrors sequence at the end. The leading dame here, our dear Rita Hayworth. She's just incredible. She gives an incredible performance. Probably one of my favorite Wells females characters uh, of any of his films. I think. Yeah, yeah, I'd say that. I don't really have much else to say here. The fast pacing also brings it down a little bit. It's a little bit too fast for me. I wish there were certain beats that gave way to certain moments of the next scene. But I loved it. I'm gonna go 4.5 stars. Number 5.
Yeah, and well, that's another case of the editing thing because the Orson Welles rough cut was, I believe, an hour and 7 minutes longer,
which is a lot of material. I do wonder what
That's a lot.
all was in there. That's a lot. That's almost double the length. But yeah, so that both of you already talked about my number 4. My number 4 is his final film, The Other Side of the Wind. I think this movie's just really great, but I think I have to be in the right mind for it. I think if this, for me, it's a 5-star just across the board. I think it's just really well shot. He's going for this very quick, fast-paced, rapid editing style, contrasted with the film within a film, which is all in these like flowing exterior long takes. And they're shot on kind of different film grains and stuff. So it's definitely a very different experience. It's very kind of fast moving and it's interesting. It has a very kind of self-referential script. Clearly, J.J. Hannaford, played by John Huston. It has elements of Wells. There's other characters like Brooks Otterlake, who clearly is based on Bogdanovich, who actually plays him. And of course, the blanking on her name, but the person who's obviously a stand-in for Pauline Kael. Yeah, this movie is really great in my opinion. I think I have to be in the right frame of mind though. I think if I watch this movie not feeling it at all, I don't think I like it. But I think if this catches me when my brain is like tuned to the right frequency, I think it's pretty much perfect. I'm giving this one another 5.
Okay, cool. My number 4 is another film noir called The Stranger from 1946. And so there's this like a former Nazi in town, Franz Kindler, played by Wells, who's getting like chased by this investigator, and this Franz seems to be like this normal teacher at first, before we get to know his true identity, and we're watching Franz trying to work it out with all parties considered. He's like going to get married and all, and he's now living the married life, and he's trying to live in a lie basically to everyone in that small town, aka he's the stranger. And yeah, I this was a I think a very good film. This was the first film noir he made. I don't know, does Aidan have anything to say here? Because this has the like a Nazi theme. I was surprised they could or were able to use like this Holocaust footage in this one. Like, do you have anything to add there? Like,
Yeah,
how they were able to.
well, I think I mean obviously it was public domain footage, so I don't think there were any legal like problems, but I think in terms of like the choice, I think it was mainly to kind of give a real like edge to the character of Kindler, because I think to show like actual like concentration camp footage kind of brings the character, gives him a more kind of sadistic edge now that you know what he's like capable of. And I think so I think that was the main reason or purpose.
Yeah,
It's the first film to include footage of the Holocaust, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I think the acting all around is pretty great. I don't know. This might be one of my favorite Wells performances, perhaps, in this film. Him being the central character, Franz, and obviously I'm really saying the same things overall, because I like it's hard because in a way all of these films are well made and all, So yeah, I think this was a good watch. I had subtitles, yay, and it's a very good film. 4 stars, number 4, The Stranger.
Damn it,
Oh, and
Aidan.
what?
I want to know if you're taking notes here, because
I'm taking notes of you guys' rankings.
I want to know how similar Taavi and I are. I share the same 4 as Taavi. I got The Stranger. It's his first real noir, and I was impressed on a storytelling aspect. It has a clear beginning, middle, end, and it's concise. It's consistent, and you can. I think it's paced very very good. It's Wells is kind of tricky because he's kind of the person that you need to sink your teeth into to really understand some of his films. But this, I feel like anybody could enjoy it, as well as the next film I'm going to talk about. I think the portrait of the villain in this, who's literally just an evil Nazi, I think he was great. I think it's better portrayal at evilness than Citizen Kane is. I like his obsession with clocks. I think that's kind of striking, and I feel like there may be a deeper metaphor there. But I also love that it backfires at the end on him, that clock obsession. The movie lives up to its name, as not only is France the stranger here, but the detective is as well. The stranger could also be fascism creeping its way into the underbelly of American culture. And I love that Wells has a way of bringing these kind of topics to life. I love the dynamic between France and the woman, Mary, and the levels of intimacies that are slowly drawn apart and shown to be mute. Like there was no connection there to begin with, especially after she finds out the big secret. This is good. I like it. It's 5 stars. My number 4.
Nice. I wasn't sure if you were going the full 5, but that's cool. Yeah. I'm actually shocked that you're higher on one of these movies than I am as the supposed big fan. But
Oh yeah.
my number 3, we're going from Orson Welles' last film to his first. I have Citizen Kane. There is not much I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said 4 million times. It's every aspect of the film, the story, the direction, the editing. It's all been kind of explored. It's all, but I just want to add that I think it's underrated for its emotional aspect. I think people talk about its technical achievements all the time, but I do think it's very emotionally engaging as well. I think the biggest thing, I don't think it does a very good job of getting you to sympathize with the character of Charles Foster Kane. I think it's pretty good at making you pity him, though. And I think that's a very good, kind of strong element of it. And I do like the rosebud element. It's a very good kind of cap to the entire story, and it feels very fitting in a way that Kane is this kind of mogul and political figure and all of this stuff who is so well known to those people in the world where he actually exists, but not to us because he's just a fictional character. But no one in the actual world where Kane was found out what Rosebud meant, and everyone in the world where he's just a fictional person did. So that's pretty interesting. I think that might have been intentional. It seems like a conscious choice. But yeah, all the performances are very strong, and I think it does a very good job just keeping you engaged with things that could otherwise be kind of unengaging, like the opening scene with the newsreel. It on paper it's just simple exposition, but it's delivered so just so compellingly, and the characters in shadow, it takes what could otherwise just be a simple scene recounting the story and turns it into something truly amazing. I think that's really great. That's something I'm really kind of in awe of the film for doing. I don't think like it's not boring like you could expect. I think it's consistently engaging and consistently effective, which is really cool for me. So yeah, 5 stars, the greatest movie of all time, ranked at number 3. But it's my ranking. I can do what I want.
Of course.
Wait. I predict
Yeah.
we're gonna have Citizen Kane next, Taavi.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna have The Trial next. Um, good guess though. This is a psychological drama based on a Kafka novel, and it was fun to see where the film is going. I think some of the scenes were honestly kind of hard to watch in a way. I'm like thinking one scene where towards the end, where the main character Joseph talks to like this artist, and I felt very anxious to watch it, especially that scene. There were like bunch of kids chasing Joseph, and they kept staring him through these wall cracks and all. And I don't know, some of those like almost extreme close-ups to like those kids' faces, and you can sometimes only see their eyes or something like that, and the kids' behavior was off the charts really. So, but it's an interesting. A lot of these scenes how they are made and how they're like. I think it's the psychological part that comes through, and he's starting to get more paranoid and etc. And but yeah, this Joseph K is like this very kind and in a way basically a normal guy until he's quite randomly charged for a crime that he may or may have not done. And then one by one his life starts to get thrown to pieces, and he has to work out what's happening to him, like mentally and socially in a way. And obviously he's very confused about it, and all the people around him are also like his family and stuff, and like he tries to find out the truth with along with these people that some are helpful and some are perhaps not. And I think it's a interesting film with there's plenty of style and effort to make this, and it's very captivating also. If I would say a little negative that I personally had, it was I think Anthony Perkins is great in this, but sometimes I really like was just thinking like I'm watching the psycho actor here on screen. That was sometimes come to my head. Like I always see that actor as that Norman Bates, really. But yeah, I think this is a great film. 4.5 stars for me. The Trial.
Cool. So I feel like my top two films of Orson Welles is going to inevitably elevate my hipster status. My number three, though, is a very, 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 very accessible, extremely accessible film. At this point in my dive, I was kind of hoping that Wells would take things to the next level, and that was the main thought that I had whenever I was watching these in chronological order. This film changes that. Much like Citizen Kane, there's a lot of creative shots all over this movie, not just the ending. Um, yes, I want your touch of evil at number three. I think it's a perfect film from beginning to end. I think the opening tracking sequence is some of the best movement in cinema that I've ever seen. It's a rare moment of pleasure in knowing that I'm going to be in for a good ride. As like I said, most Wells films are something that you really have to sink yourself into. This just draws you in immediately. I feel like that is kind of the start of Wells' ability to kind of hook you in, like from hook, line, and sinker. I think this film is about borders and the racial divide in America and the silly lines we draw to create divisions that separates us as humans. I think this has one of Wells' best character acting, as I'm really able to hate the conniving fat pig that he portrays in this movie. I love the scene at the end with the recording bug as Charleston Heston tries to garner up a confession from his adversary. Um, I love the last quote of this movie from the lady at the brothel, and some pretty hard sequences in this movie, but also some weird, silly ones. Like, I don't know, one character. It's still a 5-star film, but like I I mentioned his silliness in our dual episode of Spielbergathon.
Dennis Weaver.
Dennis Weaver, good old Dennis Weaver. You know what? I think he brings a little bit of character to this movie, like a little bit of comedic relief, and you needed that. But what a silly actor. I'm. It's still 5 stars. Great film. It's probably one of my favorites of that decade. So love it.
Yeah, and that leads me very easily into talking about the same film as my number 2, Touch of Evil. Yeah, I think it's just really good. Like, this is one of those movies. A lot of his films are inaccessible, more so. You have to be in the right like state of mind. But with this one, I feel like I could just put it on at any time. It's perfect like entertainment. Um, but it's so well rounded too, because it has that grandness to it in the form of his like very elaborate tracking shots and unusual camera angles, the big set piece at the end with the recording bug, which is a really great finale. Um, and but it also has other elements, it has the comedic elements you talked about with Dennis Weaver, who I think is kind of funny. I like him. And it does have more gruesome scenes, like in the scene where Quinlan like kills Grandi, which I think is like totally terrifying the way it's shown. And then it's framed for Susie Vargas, and she like wakes up to see him like dead, like bug-eyed, and it's so creepy, but it's such a great visual.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that shot. That was weird. I loved it.
yeah, yeah. I think this movie's really well rounded. Like, it has elements of different things all working together to make a really great like product. So I think it's just well rounded. It has elements of a lot of things. I think Orson Welles gives a really great performance. It's crazy to me that he's like 41 in this movie. He looks so much older. Just like the way he portrays Quinlan as just like this very detestable type of guy. He's just a great villain in terms of someone to root against. But yeah, and there's like a Wells cut. I didn't watch that. I watched the theatrical. My understanding is it's a bit longer. It's about 15 minutes longer. It mostly just has a few extra scenes fleshing out the plot. I don't think it's radically different from the theatrical cut. So that's just that movie's kind of background. But yeah, 5 stars. I really love this movie. And this used to be my favorite for a long time. And this was, yeah, like a solid number 1 for me, but it isn't anymore. So number 2.
Okay, nice. We got some touch of evil love there. My number 2 is Citizen Kane, the debut film that also could equal for the greatest film ever made. Everyone loves it. Nobody hates it, really. And also the one where he got perhaps the most control too. And it starts with the classic rosebud scene, And thereon we go to this ride, basically following Charles Foster Kane's life story from childhood to his successful period to his basically doom. And I think the film is like a positively flashy of its time, and it features plenty of like editing techniques and like to a very fine effect, and it has like montages and camera work with like deep focus. You see everything in focus really, and flashbacks, and there's makeup to make Wells look really much older, which they use very nicely too, and lots of movement in time, and which they also do quite effortlessly. And I think the directing and screenplay rules in this one. This is the kind of the Orson Welles and the Cruise show, in my opinion, and yeah, the Charles Foster Kane show in some respect. And perhaps some of the side characters like went a little over my head in a way, because I was so drawn to the filmmaking aspect of this film. And this is a film I would want to rewatch as well. Like I would buy it. I would buy it really, and I will eventually. I could make an argument this is the best film he's made, perhaps, but it's not my personal favorite as an experience. And I can't really put my mind, but why is this wouldn't be a 5 in a way? But there's something that keeps me putting it into 5. So I'm going 4.5. I think it's a great film. I think it could be a 5 when I rewatch it eventually. But like, I think the filmmaking aspect especially is on point in this one. And it's like was the first one, so that was really cool aspect also. So Citizen Kane, my number 2.
All right. I believe, and I think it's really cool that we do this, you guys. Like, I feel like ranking things and your personal enjoyment of film and really just any art in general really shows a lot about yourself. Time for a confession. Art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. I have F for I fucking love this. F for fake. Wells is here to entertain, thrill you, and above all, fake you. I knew nothing about the big twists, which I won't spoil, but I got bamboozled in a good way, and I loved it. I love that he has such a charming allure in this movie, and but he also begs the audience to question the notion of authenticity. So like you can't help but wonder, like, is this Wells? Is this him? Like, do you is this you? Are you showing us yourself? I can, however, confirm that Sir Orson Welles is a fucking lunatic. The way he wants you to look at art and question everything, I I love it. The film kind of takes a look at the art world and asks the question, if an expert of paintings is able to be tricked by forgery, who is a true fake? The the expert or the forger? And the editing in this film is some of the best that he's ever achieved. And I think it's really, you should show this film to aspiring video essay makers or documentarians, because this is top notch. Uh, all of that brilliance, however, I think is overshadowed by what I think is the heart of this movie, and that's Mr. Orson Welles himself. I can't tell, is this genuine? Like, it's hard to say. Like, there's a great quote from Alan Moore that I learned whenever I was in college. Artists use lies to tell the truth. Yes, I created a lie, but because you believed it, you found something true about yourself. I certainly did, Orson, and I I feel like this speaks immaculate volumes to all three of us as people who are talking about this genius of a man. I loved it so much. It's 5 stars. It's not my favorite because I wanted to give my number one to a more narrative structure, if you can call it that, if you've been following along. But yeah, I loved it. I don't know, like if this was like presented at the Academy Awards, would it be under documentary or fiction? It's hard to say. Did this get any awards, Aidan?
No, it didn't. I think the main reason is probably that it was like made in Europe, and I think Orson Welles was kind of an outcast from the like main Hollywood studio system at the time. So yeah.
That's a shame.
But I mean, you make a very persuasive point that kind of makes me rethink its last place status, I guess, in my ranking. But I don't know. I get what I get why you like it so much. It seems like it's almost like an essay in film form in a way.
For sure. We've reached our top films.
Yep.
Yeah, so for my number one, I'm going with Orson Welles' film The Lady from Shanghai, released in 1947. Starring him, his wife, Rita Hayworth, who they separated during production, as well as Everett Sloane. This movie is about a sailor, Michael O'Hara, who's played by Wells, who gets himself stuck in this crazy murder extortion plot where he's framed for the murder based on these. He thinks he's faking a murder, but it turns out to be a real one, and he gets framed for the crime, and it's a very intriguing, like, thriller. A lot of people attacking each other and shifting allegiances. I just really love the story. I think it's so much of a labyrinth that it's almost in danger at times. With a different director, I think it could be difficult to follow. It could almost end up something like The Big Sleep, which I think is an amazing film, but the plot is so confusing. I still think the plot is totally understandable here, and I think the big reveal at the end is amazing. Obviously, it's shot so well, between the big tracking shot at the beginning in New York and the on-location stuff shot in Mexico, as well as the famous aquarium scene, which is such a great use of a location and to like build the setting and contribute to the atmosphere. But definitely no discussion of the film would be complete without talking about the Hall of Mirrors scene, which is an absolute classic in film, definitely my favorite scene in a movie. I just think it's so perfectly paced, timed, shot, the way the characters move, the way the mirrors are used to stack images on top of images to disorient the viewer. I think it's absolutely brilliant. This is my favorite Orson Welles film. It's also my favorite film, just period. I really love it. I could watch it again and again, pick up new things every time. Yeah, I think Everett Sloane also has my favorite performance in any of these movies as Arthur Bannister. He plays him as a very clear villain, but one that is also like you understand why he's that way, and he feels like someone like real. Like he doesn't play him mustache twirling or anything. And of course, the courtroom scene, I haven't even talked about that. The courtroom scene is amazing. The way it's played out as kind of like a farce, and it eventually devolves into Bannister interviewing himself, and the way the court is just portrayed as incompetent. The whole movie is just great scene after great scene, perfectly paced. has just great performances, great shooting. It's a great movie. It's my number one, The Lady from Shanghai.
I could watch it like any time and I'd really enjoy myself. Yeah, I just got nothing but great things to say about it.
Well, likewise, Aidan, because your passion makes me want to bump it up to a 5. But that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Clay, can you tell me what's my number one?
Your number one is A Touch of Evil, Mister.
Yes, thank you, Clay. So Touch of Evil is my number one, and my number one thing to say about it is go watch it now. It's so much fun. I had such a great time watching it. Like, I just a guy who likes good time watching films. I don't call myself a critic or anything. I just want to have a good time watching this film, and I had the best time watching A Touch of Evil. This is one of his masterpieces. Not the only one though. A pure film noir in black and white. That's always a good thing to have, and like a plenty of twists, suspense, great camera work, especially like the opening, like a beginning with like a, was it Henry Mancini's music?
Yeah, Mancini. I think he does a great job.
Yeah, that theme is awesome, and like I think pretty superb acting in this. Perhaps the only one I was slightly not sure was the Dennis Weaver one. I think he was pretty funny, but I wasn't in a way sure how does he fit there with, but he was a nice comic relief. I can give him that. And yeah, just a cool watch, and basically just my having such a good time watching it put it to my number one, and it's a 5-star film for me. So magnificent score.
Awesome. Y'all, this is so cool. Wells is like uh an eye into our personalities, because like you have Mr. Film Noir over here with Aidan, and then Mr. Fun with Taavi, and I'm about to kill the mood right now because I am Mr. Serious. I thought this movie left quite an impression on me. My favorite Orson Welles film is The Trial. So you go into
Nice.
this premise, you go into this premise thinking you know exactly what to expect as a man played by Anthony Perkins is found guilty to a crime he knows nothing about. Perkins is interesting here. He's kind of a dangling little character, but he just nails it. It's a shame that, like, I was looking through his filmography later down the road, and he just really gets typecast into this type of role, and to the point of silliness, and it's just sad. But this is adopted from a book by Kafka, and I feel like this is an exercise in one's ability at interpretation. It was almost daunting to me at first, honestly. Like, it was reminding me of a lot of films that were made recently, of things like I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which was released much later down the line, which oddly enough, I have a different opinion about that. But every shot in this film, including his use of shadows, kind of reveal a sense of mystery. And there's a looming presence in this film that gives you such an unsettling vibe. Like, it's one of those films that actively made me sick watching it. I had a physical reaction while I was watching this film, and that doesn't happen to me in films that aren't, especially in films that aren't exploitive. Like, this is not an exploitation film, but I still had this general reaction from it, from the characters and the way each frame was shot, with the angles and everything, like you were saying. Like, I had to stop and think if I really loved what I was watching here, and it turns out I do. I love this a lot. Like, there's not many films that can generate that kind of reaction for me, and it's done in such a way that's oddly tame and endearing. Like, it doesn't exploit the audience. It's like a super good episode of The Twilight Zone. I love it. It's a movie that opens up with an allegory about law, like essentially fate versus free will. And some view the metaphors in this film as some sort of religious iconography. And I don't think it's about that. I think it's about life's unpredictabilities. And in the vein of unpredictability, this is my favorite Wells film. 5 stars. I really can't say much else. Go watch it. It's so good. And this was so fun. Like, I love this. This is one of my favorite episodes, guys. Like,
Yeah,
I
definitely for me as well.
you guys
Yeah,
have any closing remarks?
well, just a brief thing about the trial, which is that a part of me thinks it went over my head a little bit. I think maybe I watched it again because even though I gave it a 4, I think there was parts of it where the movie might have been like smarter than I was. So I'll definitely rewatch. But yeah, I'm very happy with this episode. I think it's happy with
I think it,
to hear all your opinions and whatnot.
yeah, I feel like with the trial, it definitely deserves a rewatch, but sadly, the way I watched it, it wasn't ideal. I watched it on Tubi, and I want to go out and buy this on Blu-ray. You said there's a Blu-ray copy, so I want
Yeah.
to get my hands on that.
There is. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a fun episode, and Clay had the app for fake and trial at the top. That was very hipster of you.
Okay. Oh, we're gonna go there now. Well,
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I know.
uh,
You had
yeah,
Touch of Evil at 5 stars, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we all topped off at 5, which is good.
Touch of Evil
Yeah.
was the second film we've all given 5 to after 2001.
Oh,
Wow, that's
Cool.
shocking.
Yeah.
damn.
Well deserved too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, I was just gonna say that we're gonna be doing a lot more directors with large filmographies after this. This week we will be releasing our second episode of Spielbergathon, looking at the Sugarland Express. Taavi, do you want to talk about the next director that we're going to be doing actually in the month of October? Because we're going to bring Tom, our guest from our Ari Aster video, back on the show.
Okay, so yeah. The next director we're doing, all 3 of us, is going to be Terrence Malick. 9 films. Oh damn, I was like trying to say what's the biggest Malick film, but I don't know the numbers now. Is it Tree of Life or The Thin Red Line? Not sure. But yeah, he's a pretty well known director. Like perhaps don't know how that episode is gonna go. His films are they're like this, has this own style, let's say. But yeah, that's gonna be in October, and yeah, I'm excited for it.
So in September, we're going to be doing 4 episodes with our guest Tom. One of them is going to be Wes Anderson. Aidan, I have to ask, how can you like The Magnificent Amberson so much but not like Wes Anderson?
Number 1, the Magnificent is in black and white. Number 2 is Finding the Rest of You Guys.
All right. Aidan, do you have any closing remarks on this episode, or anything you want to say before you leave for the month of October?
My closing remarks to the
September.
audience is check out these movies. They're really good. But yeah, see you guys.
Everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we are clearly doing an episode together before, Tom. Do you remember that?
You're right. We're going to be doing a
my
director
God.
that I picked out. I keep underselling my director choices. Mike Mills next week. Be on the lookout for that. Wes Anderson
Yeah.
sometime in September with Tom, Terrence Malick, all three of us. Enjoy, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you think Citizen Kane is the greatest film of all time? Let us know in the comments.